Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident panelist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_netam. So today we're going to continue on looking at the offensive line. I think we're just going to skip tackle. Look, we have, without any question whatsoever, a starting left tackle and a starting right tackle, and I don't see any scenario in which somebody takes that job. There's also a question of, will the Packers draft a tackle and move him to guard? Entirely possible. If I happen to see something, we'll address it. But I want to focus on the guys that are considered to be interior offensive linemen. The other thing I wanted to address, because it's a weird thing, the Packers for a long time have had a certain kind of offensive lineman that they've used and that they've worked with and whatnot. And to some degree, that's where the tackle converting to interior comes from, because tackles, generally speaking, not always, but they tend to be a little bit more athletic. And so that works for the Packers because they like it, sort of the lean, athletic interior guys, which is not necessarily the case anymore. It's not to say that you can't take some 330-pound tackle and kick them inside, like Belton, for example. But anywho, I'm interested in this shift that the Packers have taken in regard to their offensive line and everything that comes with that, their run game and everything that needs to evolve with this. I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole of, has this completely screwed us over, because ever since we made this shift, everything has gone horribly as far as the offensive line. But leaving all that aside, the bigger question that I had is this a real, actual shift in philosophy? Or is it just kind of a coincidence? Because as I've said, there are always outliers. There's always the possibility. There's always the possibility that they could draft a bigger guy that just end up being outliers. But it seems to be a bit of a pattern here. I mean, you went from pretty much never doing it to pretty much exclusively doing it. I mean, Sean Ryan was a massive outlier that just didn't make any sense at the time he was drafted, and it seems like just about ever since then, starting the next year, it's all been big guys, from Belton to Banks, draft, free agency, whatever. And so I kind of wanted to look at that a little bit and just say, I don't want to, I guess, canonize speculation. That is to say, I don't want to see them do one or two or three things and then just say, okay, this is what is happening. So I want to start there real quick. The first thing that stands out is Brian Gutekunst in, I think this is 2020. It says, so starting 2025, I guess this would have been last year, I suppose. And what do we do? Belton and Banks last year, right? He said, at the February 2026 NFL Combine, Gutekunst explicitly addressed the intentional move to a bigger offensive line, saying, coming out of 2024, I just felt like we were getting pushed around more than I wanted to. He goes on to say, we did want to get bigger, a little bit more stout up front, to be able to move people in the run game if we can. The second part of this, that there's the, is Gutekunst just saying, bigger is better, bigger makes us tougher, bigger means we won't get pushed around anymore? Maybe, and that's pretty solid evidence that he said we're going to do it, and then we did it. The secondary part, which is the part that I had mentioned, not necessarily because I know, but because it seems to be, I guess. But if we go back, Dusty Evely, back in June of 2025, wrote an article titled Looking Back on the Packers' 2024 Offensive Approach. A little ways down, there's a paragraph that says, the biggest shift we saw was from their run game, where we saw the Packers use more gap scheme runs than we've seen from them in the LaFleur era. So just so we're clear, we generally define this as an outside zone, wide zone kind of a thing. If we're talking about gap, we're talking about power, we're talking about more, as opposed to the line shifting laterally or horizontally, they're attacking straight ahead. They're sort of attacking the man in front of them and just creating gaps. He says, utilizing more pulling linemen is something LaFleur has been trying to get to for years, but due to limitations on the offensive line, he could never quite get it to work. That all changed in 2024. We saw pullers in week 1, but LaFleur was able to show off his run game creativity, and the 2 games Malik Willis was forced to start, working on some spinner series runs that look more like a home run, more at home in single wing offense than a 2024 NFL offense. That approach continued even after Jordan Love came back in, though it was dialed back initially due to Love's knee not being to say where he could pivot well enough to run the offense. The ability and willingness to pull linemen in the run game helped to level up their play-action game as well. Their plus .32 EPA per play on play action was good enough to rank second in the league in 2024, behind only the Rams. It was the Packers' best performance on play action since their .39 EPA in 2020, which was a very, very elite offense, number 1 offense in football by quite a bit. There was an Acme Packing Company article by Rich Madrid back in March of 2025, Packers' most efficient concept of 2024. It reads, the Green Bay Packers under head coach Matt LaFleur have a diverse run game that they lean heavily into in a variety of ways. When most fans think of LaFleur, they think of outside zone blocking schemes he adapted from Kyle Shanahan coaching tree. But for the last several seasons, LaFleur has been leaning heavily into between the tackles runs, inside zone, power, counter, duo, etc. And in 2024, their most efficient run concept was duo. Duo is a great concept to lean into the way the Packers have because it provides the zone scheme running teams in the Shanahan tree a nice change of pace to outside zone blocking scheme. Not entirely sure how that's supposed to be read, but I'll just add this little piece. On duo, commonly referred to as power without a puller, the offensive line blocks the defensive front with a series of double-team blocks, making the running back read the middle linebacker on the second level. It is a downhill vertical run game concept that looks like inside zone, but is considered a gap scheme run because it creates new gaps along the front by displacing defenders with double-team blocks. We've got another article. This one is a little bit later. We're kind of going forward in time here. Again, Dusty Evely over at Acme Packing Company, November 5th of 2025. Packers film room return of the power run game, ? Without going too much into it, shows that the Packers were at 14.8% gap scheme runs, which 2.5 yards per attempt early in 2025. Then jumped up to 24% gap scheme runs, 9.8 yards per attempt. So it kind of highlights, again, it kind of runs through some of the stuff that he had mentioned before. 23-24 is when you saw him start to incorporate more gap type runs. And then he says something changed in the Panthers game. Maybe it was game plan specific. Panthers defense is a solid defense against the run, but has struggled against gap scheme. But the Packers leaned heavier into gap scheme runs than we'd seen them do all season, and they excelled at it. Against the Panthers, gap scheme runs made up, here you go again, 24% and 9.8 yards per attempt. Now, this article is in November. So, again, it's kind of a question as to whether or not they continued that or whether it went backwards, and I don't know. But there was also an article by Pete Doherty and Eric Baranczyk over at PackersNews.com. And the article kind of talked about how the Packers have been running the ball better when they've pulled linemen in gap and power run schemes and have struggled more in zone. So, again, I say all this to say that I've been kind of alluding to something without actually really knowing. And I don't fully know exactly what the plan is, but if you're following the evidence, based on, a lot of these articles and what people who have been looking at these things have been saying, it seems to me that there is a concerted effort to, number one, get bigger, and number two, focus more on a power run scheme. And that all happened around the time we got Josh Jacobs, so it's somewhat fair to assume that either Jacobs was the cause of the change or Jacobs was a piece of a puzzle that Matt LaFleur had been trying to build since day one. And it's probably the second, to be honest. There's been a general concerted effort toward bigger offensive line running backs for a while, but when you have Aaron Jones as your starting running back, you kind of cater to that. And the first time they had the opportunity to change, they changed in a very specific direction. But Either way, it's all kind of working together in concert, and I'm assuming that they kind of work together. Gutekunst wanting to get bigger, Lafleur wanting to do more power. Not to say that, you don't need athleticism, because if you're pulling linemen, obviously athleticism is a piece of that puzzle. But it is a little bit different than what we had in the past with the smaller guys that need like elite athleticism more so than anything. It's also good to hear in a couple of these things, because I've been upset, obviously, with the problems we've had along the offensive line, and to hear people say that where we excel is actually in power is, I guess, somewhat encouraging. The problem is, maybe that's because these are the guys that we've got, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're good at it. It's more so that we've gotten significantly worse at the thing we used to be very good at, but are not surprisingly getting better at the rushing style that caters to the types of people we're going out and getting. So, anywho, we're going to move forward with this assumption that this change has happened, and then what does that mean in terms of what we may be looking for interior offensive linemen. We'll do that when we get back from the break. Be right back. All right, so what are we looking for if we want to kind of build in this direction? We'll start off with the guards. If you're looking for a guard that kind of excels in duo, for example, the guard is part of a combo/double team at the point of attack, usually with a tackle or center, to displace the defensive tackle vertically off the line, then climbs to the second level linebacker. In power, classic gap scheme, the guard is often the puller. Backside guard pulls to kick out the edge defender or lead block on the linebacker. Key demands: violent hands, power to move bodies off the spot, sustain through the whistle, and finish blocks while still handling zone reaches when called. For the center, in duo, the center is the hinge of the double team, often doubling the nose or backside defensive tackle with the guard tackle, displacing him vertically, then climbing to the Mike linebacker. He also makes all the pre-snap line calls and IDs the Mike. In power, the center provides the down block or hinge help and climbs to the second level while communicating protections. Key demands: elite scheme intelligence, quick snap plus immediate engagement, leverage to move bodies, and leadership to keep the line coordinated in motion-heavy sets. If you wanted to identify sort of a perfect guard, you're looking for 6'4 plus, 315 to 335, 33 plus inch arms, 28 to 32 bench reps, 40 time between 515 and 540, functional quickness, not elite speed. 3-cone and shuttle, strong change of direction for combo climbs and zone reaches. Good vertical and broad for generating movement. Core traits: elite vertical displacement, power at the point of attack, violent hand, strong punch, and ability to sustain combo blocks and then climb to linebackers. Functional zone athleticism, nasty finish, tough and balance in pass pro, and versatility. Can play both guard spots. Center experience is a plus. Perfect center prototype: 6'3", 6 to 6'5", 310 to 325, 32 plus inch arms, 25 to 30 plus reps on the bench, 5'10 to 5'3", 540, 3-cone and shuttle, elite agility for a big man, explosion, solid vertical and broad for climbing to the linebackers. Core traits: scheme intelligence, leadership is a non-negotiable. Instant line calls, Mike identification, and communication in motion-heavy offenses. Power to displace the nose tackles, quick snap plus immediate engagement, balance, mirror ability, and anchor, versatility, some guard experience as a bonus, durability and toughness to be an every down anchor. So as we look at that, as far as interior offensive line, and we can stretch this a little bit, I'm iffy on whether we should include Emmanuel Pregnon. I guess why not? There's not a ton of options. So if you're looking at the Packers pulling the trigger in the second round on an interior offensive lineman, I would guess relatively unlikely just because we've kind of locked in on our offensive line, but it's certainly not impossible if they really like somebody. The two right now that seem to be in that range, well, I guess it's kind of three, but there's two that are probably gone-ish. Pregnon is at 39, and Chase Besantis is at 47. 47 is much closer to being believable that he could be there. Both of those two guys fit. They're a little bit on the slightly lighter side, despite not being light at all. Besantis around 315, Pregnon at 318. The only real flaw with Pregnon would be his age. His age, and then you could say his sort of breakout year or breakout age, because he broke out in 2025, his first year at Oregon. 87 overall grade, 86 run blocking, 88 pass blocking. He was a freaking dominant left guard. But he absolutely fits the prototype of exactly what we described almost perfectly. But again, he's probably gone. Besantis also may be. He's on the consensus board at 47, which is before when the Packers will be picking. Doesn't mean he won't be there, but it's worth keeping that in mind. Besantis is 6'5", 315. He doesn't quite have the grades that Pregnon has, but on the positive side, he's just 21 years old. He'll be 22 this year. And his first kind of breakout year was in 2024, meaning when he was 20 years old, he had his first real solid season, and that was his first time moving full-time to guard. 72 run blocking, 70 pass blocking. The only real limitation here, outside of the maybe questionable grades, if that even correlates to how the Packers feel about him, would be somewhat shorter arms, 31 3/4. I mean, it's very, very close, and it's probably a non-issue. But as far as, checking all the boxes, that would be maybe one of the only ones. Again, would the Packers pull the trigger here? I don't know. The first second rounder that is expected to be around would be Georgia Tech offensive lineman Keelan Rutledge. He's at 64. Our pick, again, is at 52. So you can call it a little bit of a reach, but it's really not that big of a deal. Rutledge is a beast, right? Again, exactly what the Packers are looking for. He, at the combine, was 316. I don't know what is happening upstairs with the chairs. He was listed on PFF at 330, so I don't know if he massively cut down or if everybody just overestimated his weight or what, but he is a big dude. He has a 9.53 RAS, so as far as the Packers in the early rounds, there's no kind of red flag there. He checks every single one of the boxes that we laid out. The height, the weight, the arm length, the 40 time at 5:05, which is very, very fast. He ran the fastest short shuttle of all offensive linemen at the combine. His RAS card has good size, great speed, great explosion, and elite agility. Spent 2 years at Middle Tennessee, 2 at Georgia Tech. His 2 years at Georgia Tech, he had 78 and 78 pass blocking grades. His run blocking went from a 60 to a 77 in his final year. It was his first year having a really good run blocking year. He's just 22 years old, has been a right guard his entire career. Another really solid fit, and this guy's probably going to be closer to a third-round pick, so again, it gets more desirable as you go. But Jalen Farmer out of Kentucky. He is just 21 years old. He is, let me get his official weight and height, 6'5", 312, close enough. 4.93 40-yard dash, which is elite. He also has good explosion grades and whatnot. An overall score of 984 on the RAS. Been 2 years at Florida, didn't play a ton, transfers to Kentucky, gets a job as a starter. 2025, he had a 67 run blocking, 72 pass blocking grades. He's only ever played right guard, just like Rutledge, but I think perfectly embodies what the Packers are looking for in a guard. Billy Schrauth out of Notre Dame, probably not the greatest fit in the world. The next guy that's kind of a fun fit, it's again, maybe not, it might be a slight exaggeration or a parody of a good fit, but it's a fun one. Jeremiah Wright. He's at 159 on the consensus board, so that would put him roughly, possibly as a fifth round. We got to pick at 160, so right in that fifth round range. But the guy is massive. 6'5", 331 pounds. He's played right and left guard. 2025 season, he had a 67 run blocking grade, 67 pass blocking, so above average, not spectacular. You're probably lacking a little bit in athleticism for what you're getting in terms of probably a little bit more power. It's a little bit more fun because at this point you're talking about guys that you're fine being a depth piece that could possibly grow into something more. You know, we'll see what happens with Belton. You know, we'll see what happens with Banks. We'll see what happens with Sean Ryan. Like, we'll see what happens with a lot of these guys. We don't really know what the long term is with these guys. So you're a little bit more okay playing with something like this. Again, maybe more of a caricature, but fun. Next guy that's a fun fit is Jaden Roberts out of Alabama. He's at 197, so right around where our 6th round pick is. Another guy that's somewhat obscene in his size. He is 6'5", 333 pounds. And for the most part, with only a couple exceptions, has been a very good run blocker and very good pass blocker pretty much since day one. He did have a 63 grade pass blocking in 2024 for whatever weird reason. And he also had a weird outlier in 2025 as a run blocker, 63 grade. Keep in mind, 63s are not bad. The fact that 63s are outliers for him, whereas in his career he's been 70s and this past year an 88 pass blocking grade, really speaks to how good of a player he's been and for a major program. So I'm guessing it's just the sort of questions about athleticism, perhaps. But, I mean, he is a big dude that did some really incredible things for a major program. I think that's worth taking a look at. But he's Anthony Belton 2.0 here. Another 6th round pick, Armaj Reed Adams. He's at 198, just one spot after Jaden Roberts. Very similar in terms of being a pretty large individual. He does have a little bit more versatility, whereas Jaden Roberts was strictly a right guard. He's played right guard. He's played left guard. He's played a little bit of right tackle and even 4 snaps at left tackle. So a little bit of everything except center. He's got a ton of experience, 4 years at Kansas and 2 at Texas A&M, almost 2,500 total snaps. Really didn't find his groove until he got to Texas A&M. Kansas was just not a good fit for him for whatever reason. But got to Texas, 80 grade, 86 run blocking, 76 pass blocking. He regressed a little bit in 2025, but seemed to have found his groove. Somehow just 24 years old, despite all that college experience. 787 RAS, listed at 6'5", 314, a 5'2", 840-yard dash. Solid vert, 29.5. But again, a really solid 6th round depth piece option if you're looking for a guy that at least checks the boxes enough when it comes to athleticism, but absolutely, circles the square on the power side of things. Man, I'll tell you what, there are a lot of, it's so funny. Every time I say we're looking for a particular piece, and then when you go through the list, like defensive tackle, they're all nose tackles. Wide receivers, they're all kind of the bigger wide receivers. I'm not having to skip too many guys here. Inez Cooper, guard out of Miami. 6'6", 334 pounds at the combine. Just 22 years old. PFF listed him at 350. He's had 60s across the board in 4 years as a run blocker. Pass blocking the last 3 years when he started, 78, 70, and 79. So pretty solid across the board. Another guy that, again, almost exclusively a right guard. A lot of right guards apparently coming out into this draft class. Big, powerful, classic, stereotypical right guard. But, I mean, he's very similar to a lot of, to the, it's funny because they're at 197, 198, and 200. So like 1, 2, and 3 basically right here. And they're all very similar, like 330-pound right guards that are absolute maulers. I think all 3 of them maybe have a little bit of issue with like pad level. And there's one final guy that I want to add to the list. This would be a seventh round prospect that I think is pretty interesting. Micah Morris, offensive guard out of Georgia, just 22 years old. He is, again, let me get his official weights here. 6'5", 334. Played left and right guard, primarily left guard. 5 years, all at Georgia. Never had a bad year, ever. His worst run blocking grade was a 64. His worst pass blocking grade was a 74. His past year, in 2025, he had a 72 overall, 67 run blocking, 84 pass blocking. Absolutely dominant, again, at a very big school. 997 RAS. Great size, elite speed, great explosion. At 6'5", 334, he ran a 5.09 40-yard dash, 29.5-inch vert, 904 broad jump. So again, I mean, if we're looking for a late-round flyer that has more than adequate athleticism for being a massive human being, and again, at 22, how is he 22? I don't know. 5 years at Georgia, he's just 22 years old. I guess that's what happens when you come in straight out of high school and start playing right away. But that one, I mean, honestly, more than anything, I think Micah Morris gets me the most excited just because the value is ridiculous. I mean, he is let's see, he's at 246. Potentially our second seventh round pick could grab Micah Morris. Anywho, we'll take a break. We'll come back and loop back through and look at some of the centers. There are less centers, but doesn't mean there aren't some good options. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. So for starters, we got Connor Lew. Everybody knows about Connor Lew. He is still more than likely the top center in the class. He's got the ACL issues. He also is not the biggest guy in the world. It's not terrible. He's not small. He's not 298 or anything. He's 310. But as far as like if we were going to build the perfect center, would it be Connor Lew? Probably not exactly. 6'3.5" to 310. Smaller hands. I'm sure the Packers would be happy to have him. But again, with this high of an investment for a guy that probably isn't going to be ready right away, that isn't exactly the perfect build for what the Packers are doing right now, where the athleticism is fantastic, maybe post-ACL, but the ability to kind of like sustain blocks, not just get to blocks, being a little bit lacking with the, smaller arms, smaller hands, smaller frame. It's a little bit of a reach. Certainly not impossible, though. Then we got Logan Jones, and this one's interesting because he's actually quite a bit smaller. He actually came in sub 300 pounds. He's at 299, which, again, I'm guessing the Packers would look down on that a bit. I still think he would be a pretty solid fit based on his play style. I mean, depending on what boxes we're checking here, is he durable? Yes, more so than Connor Lew for sure. Smart, intelligent leader? Yes. I think he checks all the center boxes you can need. The benefit that I'm going to give him, though, is as I'll mention again, he was on Feldman's freak list. And that not only works in terms of his athleticism, but in terms of his strength. He is a very powerful guy. And I've said this before, it reminds me a little bit of Corey Linsley. I remember wanting Corey Linsley just because I thought it was sweet that the guy had a really strong bench. And I was like, oh yeah, he'll go out there and just smash people. It would be awesome. Turns out that's exactly what Corey Linsley did. Super powerful guy. And so I think there's a chance with a guy like Logan Jones, you can kind of, have your cake and eat it too. He's a smaller, athletic, intelligent leader type that packs more of a punch than you would expect for a guy that's about 300 pounds. He is 24 years old. He has been, you can call it kind of a late bloomer. His first 2 years at Iowa were not good. So that would have been when he's 21 and 22. At age 23 in 2024, 84 grade, 82 run blocking, 77 pass blocking. 2025, 79 grade, 73 run blocking, 91 pass blocking. So he really started to hit his stride, again, a little bit later at 23 and 24 years old, but absolutely freaking dominant. Gave up 1 sack, 1 hit, and 6 hurries in his last 2 years. Those would be solid stats in a single year, much less 2 years. Also, just 2 penalties in those 2 years. So I've been a big Logan Jones fan since day one. I remain a big Logan Jones fan. I like the center class in general, as I think I've said several times. It is, let's see, he's at about 100 overall. Maybe he makes it to the 4th round. So Connor Lew at 70 is probably a 2nd-round pick, maybe a 3rd-round pick. Logan Jones is probably a 3rd-round pick, maybe a 4th-round pick. If he's available in the 4th, I'm doing frickin' backflips and screaming at my television to please draft him. And I'll just add this. I think center makes more sense. I mean, obviously versatility, if you can play guard as well, is also beneficial, center and guard. But it makes sense from a standpoint of sort of that 3-way competition. If you draft a guard, then you're competing with Belton, and that's basically it. If you draft a center, then you have, I would say, the rookie center and Belton at guard with Sean Ryan able to compete at both spots. It's primarily going to be a center battle, but it's in the pursuit of finding the best 5, you could also have him competing at the right guard spot, and we just try to find the best 5. Anywho, another guy that is seen as one of the top centers. I know it sounds silly because he's at 103 overall, but that was the note early on, depending on who people thought was the top center. Jake Slaughter. Jake Slaughter out of Florida. I would prefer Logan Jones. He's kind of like a Logan Jones, but not Logan Jonesy enough. He's a smaller interior guy. By the way, I don't know if I said Logan Jones, 9.63 RAS, 4.9 40, elite speed, elite explosion, great agility. Slaughter actually one-ups him with a 9.97 RAS. He comes in at 6'4", 303, great speed, elite explosion, good size. He is another guy that's been, he's 5 years at Florida. He started the last 3. He's been dominant for 3 years. His starting grades over the 3 years were 79, 82, 79. His run blocking grades were 79, 80, 80. His pass blocking grades 78, 84, 84. Freaking dominant. Again, though, he's coming in at 303. He's a little bit undersized. And I don't know if he gets necessarily the same benefit of the doubt as Logan Jones about his ability to handle the inside and nose tackles and whatnot, which is a stretch for Logan Jones by itself. So as much as I really like Jake Slaughter, if I had to kind of look at the guys we've looked at so far and say which one is, I don't want to say disqualifying, but probably just not a great fit, Jake Slaughter's probably it, as much as I really like him. Then we've got Parker Brailsford, the center out of Alabama. Again, size is going to be a bit of an issue. 6'2", 289. So, we're kind of going in the wrong direction here. Brailsford has been fine. He's only 22. Started 3 years, 1 year at Washington, 2 at Alabama. Pass blocking has been great since day one. Run blocking, not as much. Washington, he was fine. Alabama, it didn't work out quite as well in the run blocking department. But the size is going to be, again, the issue, unless, again, the Packers feel like they can work, that he can handle the power of these defensive tackles and sustain blocks. But I would say that's questionable. Then we've got Matt Gilbin, center out of Michigan State. This one's a little bit rough. Again, on the surface, it looks fantastic. He spent 4 years at Wake, 1 year at Michigan State. In that 1 year at Michigan State, 83 grade, 82 run blocking, 88 pass blocking, just freaking dominant. PFF lists him at 6'4", 312. It seems like it just checks all the boxes. We're good to go, ready to rock and roll. He's played left guard. He's played right guard. He's done it all. The first red flag is that he actually came in at the combine at 305. So, maybe the guy's just trimming down a little bit for the combine or something, and we can bulk him back up a little bit or something. I don't know. But that's not super wonderful. The Other red flag is the size in and of itself is 21 bench press reps is pretty low. His explosion grade was okay with a 28-inch vertical and an 8.5 broad jump, which is a 4.9 out of 10. His agility is horrendous. A 4.98 short shuttle, which is a 1.6 out of 10. And an, and an 8.333 cone, which is a 0.91 out of 10. His overall RAS comes in at a 3.46. Now, I mean, this is a somewhat of a later round guy, so maybe you can get away with not having a great RAS, but this is appalling, athleticism. So, look, I mean, if you can say that, no, he's probably a little bit bigger, well, we'd get him back to that size, and we think he's a great center, and I don't know, we don't need the athleticism, or we whatever. I don't know. If some of this is kind of fake or whatever, maybe. But at 305, terrible athleticism, 23 years old, I don't know that this is, and he has, surprisingly, at his size, 6'4" and whatnot, short arms. So that felt good on the surface, but still probably not what we're looking for. At 151, which would be roughly a fifth-round pick, we've got Jager Burton, who is University of Kentucky center. And I think for the first time in a little bit of a while, we're cooking with gas here. Again, Connor Lew, okay. Logan Jones, I think we can work with that. Jager Burton, Jagger, like Mick Jagger, I think is a little bit more what we're looking for. First of all, even despite being potentially a, fifth-round pick, 9.88 RAS, 6'4", 312, so still right in that range. 5 years at Kentucky. It's been pretty rocky. I think the scariest part is it wasn't really until year 5 that he was a pretty solid center, and it was a 68 run blocking, 80 pass blocking at 23 years old. But, again, for the value, for the size, checking as many of these boxes as we can for the athleticism, 4.94 40-yard dash, elite speed, great agility, good explosion, great size. It's not that there aren't a couple questions, but at this point, I'm happy with Jagger Burton. At 171, still a fifth-round pick, we got Pat Coogan out of Indiana, 6'5", 311. I think this one feels good because of the size more than anything else. The problem with him is, I think, despite what would appear because of, an extra 10 pounds of weight to be a pretty stout interior guy, he struggles with power a little bit. Again, we got kind of the alligator arm, small hand situation going on. I do absolutely think it's to his benefit that he played for Indiana. The fact that he blocked for Mendoza, the fact that his grades, he started in Notre Dame and consistently got better every year as a starter. So 2 years at Notre Dame, 1 at Indiana. His run blocking grade went from 65, 69, 75. Pass blocking from 65, 78, 84. So he got significantly better every single year, which, again, massively to his credit. He does have some guard experience, 769 snaps as in 2023. That was his first year starting. Was a left guard before moving to center the last 2 years. So, again, it's not going to be hard to talk me into Pat Coogan, given the program, given the size, given, everything that, the improvements. But I think just generally speaking, is he a good fit as far as what we're going to ask of him? It might be a bit of a stretch. But that's about it. I mean, I'm looking out into the UDFA territory. I'm out to 350, and everybody else appears to be a guard. We got Bryce Foster would be like the next guy at 353, very far into the UDFA range. So that's about it. Again, I think there are several guys. So guard is much more this fits. Center, maybe not quite as much. Very good centers. It's just a question of, would the Packers be okay with asking them to, line up man-to-man, mano-a-mano, and try to displace a nose tackle, If yes, to just about any of these guys, there's some very, very good options. But anywho, I'm going to leave it at that. I will talk to you tonight, tomorrow, whatever. Have a good one. Bye-bye.